The Jesuits are behind the Vatican and are the power behind the White Pope. They are the gatekeepers of the New World Order. A former bishop reveals a few home truths about the Vatican. He says that they control the Illuminati and in turn control the New World Order. Bishop Bouffard, who left the church and followed Christ as a blood-bought believer, living in Canada after 6 years as a Vatican priest, assigned the task of passing daily sensitive correspondence between the Pope and the leaders of the Jesuit order, residing at Borgo Santo Spirito 5 near St. Peter's Square, says, yes, the man known as the Black Pope controls all major decisions made by the Pope, and he in turn controls the Illuminati, said Bishop Bouffard on Greg Szymanski's radio show, The Investigative Journal, at gcnlive.com, where archives of the startling statements can be heard in their entirety. I'm not sure if that's still available, by the way. People can't imagine how evil and how much destruction they have caused and will cause, while at the same time using the perfect cover of hiding behind black robes and professing to be men of God. Bishop Bouffard's first-hand knowledge of the evil lurking within the hierarchy of the Vatican, and particularly the Jesuit order, confirms the testimony of other researchers, including Bill Hughes, author of the shocking books The Enemy Unmasked and The Secret Terrorist, as well as preeminent researcher of the Jesuit order, Eric John Phelps, author of Vatican Assassins. Bishop Bouffard claims the evil power of the Jesuits extends throughout the world, including solid infiltration of the U.S. government, the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, and major religious organizations. And we have words from famous historical figures, many of them. Some of our founders warned us of these people, warned of the dangers. People that have written books about dictators warned about them, said they caused all the wars. So we have a lot of confirmation. Masons have had quite a history with the Jesuits. Freemasonry became rife in the Vatican by the 1970s. Pope Paul VI said, "The smoke of Satan has entered the church." When he passed on, he was replaced by John Paul I. John Paul was going to blow the whistle on how Freemasonry had permeated the Vatican. His reign lasted only 33 days. They seem to be signaling that he was right. 33. In 1978 August to 1978 September, according to some sources, he was murdered, and when his body was found, he was clenching a piece of paper with the names of some high-ranking officials of the Vatican. The man Francis, known as the Pope, is a Jesuit, and this is the first time in history that a Jesuit has become the White Pope. Never supposed to happen.
Paul Williams is a church historian who has written a number of books, including The Vatican Exposed. He worked for years as a consultant for the FBI.
I believe that the Pope was murdered. I believe that the Pope died because of an administration of digitalis, and I believe that he was murdered because reputations were at stake and fortunes could have been lost if he had proceeded as Pope. The cover-up began almost immediately. The Vatican Secretary of State called for an immediate embalming of the Pope's body without removing any of the blood. This rendered an autopsy almost impossible.
This conspiracy theory relies on three central pieces of evidence. First, the embalming or preservation of the Pope's body was done unnecessarily and suspiciously early. Second, contaminating a dead Pope's blood with embalming fluid was an effective way of masking the presence of a natural, though deadly compound known as digitalis. Third, the Vatican's account of the Pope's final day in office is full of inconsistencies and is unbelievable. A team of toxicologists, embalmers, and pathologists will, through a series of rigorous scientific tests, put these claims on trial. First, the time the embalming started.
Italian law dictates that the embalming process cannot begin until 24 hours after a corpse or cadaver is discovered. When Pope Paul VI died, several weeks before, his body was not embalmed until 24 hours after the death. That's Italian law that the Vatican adhered to. In this instance, the Vatican demanded that the body be embalmed immediately.
The Vatican's reason was that an early embalming would prevent the Pope's body putrefying in the heat of the Roman summer, while it lay in state for 4 days. According to Paul Williams, the Pope's body was being embalmed within 6 hours of it being found, in marked contrast to his predecessor, who only died 33 days earlier in that same hot summer.
And this is what Mr. Williams wrote in the book The Vatican Exposed, Money, Murder, and the Mafia. The Vatican is the mafia, by the way, in case you didn't know that. You know, the ones with the casinos, and they're actually behind the Indian casinos, too. Over $50 billion in securities, gold reserves that exceed those of industrialized nations, real estate holdings that equal the total area of many countries, opulent palaces containing the world's greatest art treasures. These are some of the riches of the Roman Catholic Church. Yet in 1929, the Vatican was destitute. Pope Pius XI, living in a damaged, leaky, pigeon-infested Lateran palace, could hear rats scurrying through the walls, and he worried about how he would pay for even basic repairs to unclog the overburdened sewer lines and update the antiquated heating system. How did the Church manage, in less than 75 years, such an incredible reversal of fortune? The story here, told by church historian Paul L. Williams, is intriguing, shocking, and outrageous. The turnaround began on February 11, 1929, with the signing of the Lateran Treaty between the Vatican and fascist leader Benito Mussolini. Through this deal, Mussolini gained the support of the staunchly Catholic Italian populace, who at the time followed the lead of the Church. In return, the Church received, among other benefits, a payment of $90 million, sovereign status for the Vatican, tax-free property rights, and guaranteed salaries for all priests throughout the country from the Italian government. With the stroke of a pen, the Pope had solved the Vatican's budgetary woes practically overnight. Yet he also put a great religious institution in league with some of the darkest forces of the 20th century. Based on his years of experience as a consultant for the FBI, Williams produces explosive, never-before-published evidence of the Church's morally questionable financial dealings with sinister organizations over 7 decades through today. He examines the means by which the Vatican accrued enormous wealth during the Great Depression by investing in Mussolini's government, the connection between the Nazi gold and the Vatican Bank, the vast range of church holdings in the post-war boom period. Paul VI's appointment of mafia chieftain Michele Sedona as the Vatican banker, a billion-dollar counterfeit stock fraud uncovered by Interpol and the FBI. The Ambrosiano affair, that's the one that Pope was trying to uncover when he was killed after 33 days, called the greatest financial scandal of the 20th century by the New York Times. Did you ever hear about it? The mysterious death of John Paul I, profits from an international drug ring operating out of Gdansk, Poland, and revelations about current dealings. Yeah, now they want to take over the world with their Great Reset, the COVID scam. Yeah, and there's much more. This is just the tip of a very big iceberg right here. Pope Francis, the White Pope, is said to be the first Jesuit Pope. Now, I think there have been others because many popes had been Jesuit trained in their colleges, so secretly were likely Jesuits. They weren't official. But Francis was installed in a coup at the Vatican with Hillary and George Soros, according to WikiLeaks, which is why Assange is locked up in prison now, right? Thanks to Donald and the CIA. But he was installed, and Benedict was removed. There's no reason for his removal. He was fine. You know, usually they stay in for life. But he was removed because they wanted a Jesuit there, so they wanted no interference with their New World Order, or let's call it Satanic World Order. So that's what happened. That's why there's a Jesuit Pope. The Catholic Church has been fighting to try to straighten things out and get this influence out of their church. So that's why Hillary, all the Jesuits, Soros, and all of them, Rothschilds likely, had to get involved. They want the New World Order, and they need the Vatican to help do it. And now Francis is out there pushing environmentalism, all the social justice, which was created by the Jesuits. The whole social justice thing is just a new mask for Marxism. And now he's pushing it hardcore, ecumenicalism, trying to unite all the world's religions under one. The Catholic Church isn't Christian. A former Jesuit said that they created Islam. So now they're sitting over in Islam country, signing agreements with them and trying to form a one world religion with the other religion that they actually created as a weapon against Christians. Because remember, it's the Jesuits who did the Inquisition ever since they were formed in 1540. They were the ones out there butchering Christians, because that's why they were created, to fight the Reformation, to fight Martin Luther, to fight Protestantism, which is a protest against the control of the Catholic Church. So they're out there and they take oaths to destroy Christians, Protestants. That's why they want to take over the church, because they hate Christianity. They're not Christians. They don't worship Jesus. They say they're the Society of Jesus, but they're not. They're the opposite.
In 1820, Luigi Fortis was elected the Black Pope. During his short term in office, he spent it institutionalizing the Jesuit plan of education into colleges in Europe, Canada, and the United States. And this was the birth of Greek life. And since 1825, all but 2 U.S. presidents and U.S. vice presidents have been fraternity men. Union College, a private male-only school in New York, established Kappa Alpha, the first fraternity. Since 1795, 19 U.S. presidents have attended this school, and 2 years after the birth of Kappa Alpha, Sigma Phi and Delta Phi were established. This triad referred to themselves as fraternities, which derives from the Latin word frater, meaning brother. Jesuit established fraternities started spreading to other campuses. National chapters were created, and that is how Greek life began in the United States. The first collegiate secret society was the Fat Hat Club, created in 1750 at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. President Thomas Jefferson was a member. Thomas Jefferson also wrote favorably about Adam Weishaupt, the founder of the Bavarian Illuminati and Jesuit professor. Although Weishaupt was the frontman for the Luciferian organization, he was actually backed and funded by the black nobility Farnese family. It was the House of Farnese who elevated the Rothschilds into power and moved the Farnese family seat of power to Washington, D.C. This family is one of the most powerful families on Earth today. The Farnese family built their Pentagon fortress known as Via Caparola in Lazio, Italy. In their map room, which was designed in the 1500s, includes a painting of the world showing the continent Antarctica. Did you know that Antarctica was not officially discovered until the 1770s? This was around the same time the Farnese family recruited Adam Weishaupt to create the Illuminati and move the Farnese seat of power to Washington, D.C., where they built their second Pentagon. How did the Farnese family know about Antarctica? Interesting to note that the Washington capital is placed between Virginia and Maryland. Did you know that Larry Farnese is a state senator for Pennsylvania? In the book Rulers of Evil, Tupper Saucy explains how Washington, D.C. was built on land that was owned by the Jesuit-educated Daniel Carroll of the very rich and powerful Carroll family. Daniel's brother, John Carroll, was a Jesuit priest and the founder of the Jesuit college, Georgetown University. John Carroll was the priest of Pierre Charles L'Enfant, the man who was hired to design Washington, D.C. with occult symbology, the black nobility House of Farnese. The House of Farnese established the Society of Jesus, otherwise known as the Jesuits, as a military order through the papal bull under Pope Paul III, whose name was Alessandro Farnese. The leader of the Jesuits is called the Superior General, or the Black Pope. The first Black Pope was Ignatius of Loyola in 1539. Before Loyola was the Black Pope, he was a member of the Alumbrados, the Spanish Illuminati. the precursor to Adam Weishaupt's Bavarian Illuminati, which was started in 1776. Loyola was obsessed with fame and had a reputation of being a narcissist. Under the House of Farnese, Loyola's mission was to infiltrate and reform the Protestant and Catholic churches. Loyola established the methods of prayer, otherwise known as the spiritual exercises, which are still used today in all Jesuit training. The spiritual exercises stem from mystical and hermetic practices which enable demonic control. Hermetic magic is a type of black magic that originated from ancient Egyptians and was portrayed in the Book of the Dead. Rene d'Anjou, a descendant of the Merovingian bloodline, persuaded Cosimo Medici of the black nobility House of Medici family to establish a library at San Marco, where Plato, Pythagorean works, and books on hermetic magic were translated. It was from Cosimo Medici's library that sparked up the Greek and Egyptian teachings by the Jesuits that influenced the Italian Renaissance. The Jesuits have been responsible for major deception and murder throughout history, which is unknown to the public. In the book, The Suppressed Truths About the Assassination of Abraham Lincoln, the author claims that the powerful Giacomo Antonelli, a cardinal and secretary of the Papal States under Pope Pius IX, supervised the plot to kill Abraham Lincoln with the help of the Jesuits. Notice the hidden hand. And we all know about the JFK conspiracy involving the mafia and black nobility connections, but that would be an entire video in itself.
Especially I work in dealing with the infiltration of churches and religious institutions as well as government. That cover a tremendous number of institutions.
The purpose of that infiltration was what for?
Well, the purpose is what the Roman Catholic system has all the time as her own purpose, is to infiltrate, to penetrate all the areas of life where the Roman Catholic can have control and access for the coming world government. What that means is, in preparation for that world government, the Roman Catholic institution, especially since the establishment of the Jesuit order in 1541, to all these 500 years, they've been in preparation and through infiltration and penetration of every level of society in order to take over the world politically and religiously. There are two doctrines that define very well these dangerous goal of the Roman Catholic institution. Two doctrines define this very well. One is called the doctrine of the apostolic succession, and that is dealing with the papacy. And the other is the doctrine, the temporal power, and that is dealing with world government. Of course, both, because you can see that even the Pope and his own individual office, he meet those requirements. He is not only the head of his church, as he called himself, John Paul II, the present Pope, said he is the pastor of his church. He is not only that, but he is the head of his state, of his country. What that means, he is the head of a political state. Both combinations are in one office there. In prophetically speaking, that is what we see in the book of Revelation. The political power always hand to hand with the religious power.
Vladimir Putin was born on October 7th, 1952. He was born in Leningrad, which was then the Communist Soviet Union. His grandfather was the personal chef of communist leaders Stalin and Lenin. Kind of crazy. Lenin ruled Russia during the First World War, and Stalin was the general secretary of the Communist Party. They were both staunch Marxists. And when Putin was a child, he enjoyed reading the works of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels wrote the Communist Manifesto, and they were actually coached by Jesuit priests. There was a Jesuit priest by the name of Augustin B., who was German, and he stated that the Jesuits created the Communist Party for one reason, and that reason was to kill the tradition of the Orthodox Church in Russia. The Orthodox Church in Russia was headed by Tsar Nicholas Romanov at the time. The Communist Jesuit Party was secretly bankrolled by the black nobility of Rome. And it was the same time that the Jesuits came up with a master plan by having certain Jews who were loyal to the Vatican write the Protocols of Zion. And the Protocols of Zion were meant to do two things. First one was turn the world against the Jews by using them as a scapegoat, to be a catalyst for the Inquisition against the Roman Catholic Church. So during this time, the Jesuits worked very closely with Karl Marx, Engels, Trotsky, Lenin, and Stalin. It was during this time that gold was transferred from Germany to Russia. Karl Marx was also associated with one of the most powerful Freemasons at the time, and his name was Giuseppe Mazzini. Mazzini was closely allied with the House of Orsini, where the Grey Pope allegedly derives from. Now, Giuseppe Mazzini was a 33rd degree Freemason, and he started the famous P2 Masonic Lodge, which started the term made men. Now, made men is a mafia term. Mazzini was a globalist and a Luciferian, and he worked with Marx to push socialist agendas in Europe and America, and helped the Italian mafia expand to the United States through the rigging of professional football. There's actually a book called Interference, and it includes many links to pro football and the mafia in modern history. And of course, Karl Marx, his socialist writings were funded by the Rockefellers and J.P. Morgan, because in fact, these socialist ideas were resurrected from none other than the Knights Templar. So in the early 1900s, Tsar Nicholas Romanov II ruled Russia. He was the descendant of the House of Romanov, which was a Russian ruling dynasty for over 300 years. The 1600s to 1917 was the time that this family, the House of Romanov, ruled, until the House of Romanov was executed in 1917. In the early 1900s, the Orthodox Church was spreading all over Europe. The countries like Turkey, Greece, Serbia, Romania, etc. And this was a huge problem for the Vatican and the Catholic Church. And what happened was the Jesuits and the black nobility decided to set up the First World War. Now, at the time, the Pope was backing Germany, which was ruled by Kaiser Wilhelm. Now, Kaiser Wilhelm was the grandson of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert from the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Now, this family derives from the German House of Hohenzollern. Hohenzollern. This house has a coat of arms that has a black and white checkerboard, like you would see in Freemasonry. And they are one of the prominent original 18 families of the black nobility. And the descendants of the House of Hohenzollern are actually still around today. Just do a Google search of House of Hohenzollern, and that is a rabbit hole in itself. Now, the House of Hohenzollern, their primary function is to run the military that protects the bank for international settlements. They are a Nazi military bloodline. Okay, so Kaiser Wilhelm was working with the Pope Pius at the time, and the Jesuits to expand Germany. And now this ties in the Rothschild connection. If we go back to 1815, during the Congress of Vienna, this was the Rothschilds' first attempt at the New World Order, using the debt of the European nations as leverage. And the scheme actually failed, but they were at least successful in having Switzerland declared forever a neutral sovereignty in all future wars, in order that the funding of both sides could continue with impunity and unimpeded by the conflict. Okay, so this is how they operate. They are always controlling both sides. So the Rothschilds' ambitious one world government plan failed because Tsar Alexander I of Russia refused to be bullied by the Rothschilds. He was aware of their devious plot to enslave not only his country, Russia, but the entire world itself. Nathan Mayer Rothschild vowed from that day forward that either he or his descendants, the House of Rothschild, would destroy and take down the House of Romanov. And just over 1 century later, in 1917, the House of Romanov fell. And I will get more into that, but they were murdered by the Rothschild-sponsored communist Bolshevik thugs during the so-called Russian Revolution. And in 1869, Albert Pike predicted that there would be 3 world wars in order for the banksters to install their New World Order. And this would include religion being at the center of it. And in 1914, the first steps in bringing the pre-planned First World War started using Serbian nationalists. And they were a secret society called the Black Hand. So the Black Hand Secret Society was formed in 1911, and their logo was a skull, a vial of poison, a knife, and a bomb. The Serbian nationalists plotted the murder of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who was a member of the black nobility house of Habsburg.
Alex Jones is he publicly lauded Martin Sheen's work. Martin Sheen is a Jesuit temple coadjutor par excellence.
No, Joe, I'm with the CIA. We're not saying you're with the CIA. And I wasn't with the CIA 25 years ago when I started out. I was with good elements of the CIA when Donald Trump got elected and tried to take the country back from the because we're under globalist control. The communist Chinese, the EU, Hollywood, the big banks, they say they run this country and they broke its back. So forget the CIA, it's bigger than Coca-Cola. Come to the CIA like it's mysterious or cool, like talking about the post office. The CIA gets its talking points from me, Joe, and other patriots, not the other way around. I run the CIA, Joe. Absolutely, Charlie. It was good to see you a few weeks ago at your home. You are
Likewise.
You are looking great. And you're completely clean, aren't you?
100%. You know, here's your first pee test. Next one goes in your mouth. No, you won't get high.
Charlie, I've known you for six and a half years or so, and I knew you were completely clean, and then I've known you since. But the point is, now I've never seen you when I was out at your house and talked to you on the phone so energized as you are now.
It's hate, and it must end now. B'nai B'rith, enlightening America and the world. We'll be here till there's no more hate.
there's a new sheriff in town, and he has an army of assassins. Oh, we must speak of the Vatican assassins. Yes. I don't read anything after it comes out, because I will not waste my precious time on such ridiculous nonsense. But I understand, according to you, that there was a lot of curiosity about the Vatican assassin. And I'm like, guys, it's right there in the thing. Duh, we work for the Pope. We murder people. We're Vatican assassins. How complicated can it be?
Oh, my gosh.
What they're not ready for is guys like you and I, and Nails, and all the other gnarlingtons in my life, that we are high priest, Vatican assassin warlocks.
Our media have ignored this. I mean, when you start looking at all the people that have been writing about the Jesuits over the century, and for this to be ignored, especially the concordat that was brought together between the Nationalist Socialist government and the Vatican, how can these people in the alternative media like Alex Jones and the rest of these guys ignore this? And how can the mainstream media ignore it? And I figured it's only one reason, that they must be working for them. Because how can they look at this? For example, Mr. Joseph Robin, a Catholic writer, comments on the diplomatic agreement between the Vatican and the Nazi Reich on the 8th of July, 1933. And he writes, the concordat brought to the Nationalist Socialist government, considered nearly everywhere to be made up of usurpers, if not brigands, the seal of an agreement with the oldest international power, the Vatican. In a way, it was the equivalent of a diploma of international honorability. Thus, the Pope, not satisfied with giving his personal support to Hitler, which he did, granted in this way the moral support of the Vatican to the Nazi Reich. At the same time as the terror was beginning to reign on the other side of the Rhine and was tacitly accepted and approved, the so-called brown shirts had already put 40,000 persons in concentration camps. The programs were multiplying to the accents of the Nazi march. When the Jewish blood streams from the knife, we feel better again. And that was said by a Nazi sympathizer. In the following years, Pius XII saw even worse without being stirred. It is not surprising that the Catholic heads of Germany vied with each other in their civility towards the Nazi regime, encouraged as they were by their Roman master. One must read the disheveled ravings and verbal acrobats of opportunist theologians such as Michael Schmaus. He was later made a prince of the church by Pius XII and described as the great theologian of Munich by the publication La Croix on the 2nd of September 1954. And as we look at these writings, we see the agreement between the Vatican and all of its priests, all of its bishops, to support the Nazi Reich. And it goes on. And also, never once did the Vatican ever denounce the Third Reich. So what about the Fourth Reich, folks? What about the Fourth Reich led by the Vatican? Lessons from History of Roman Catholicism. Let me just read you this by Richard Bennett. He writes this, and then we'll get to Mr. Phelps. The lesson and warning of history that the undemocratic regimes whose leaders own allegiance to the Pope or practice the lofty principles of the Papacy pose a threat to individual liberty and carry out religious persecution. For example, the Inquisition was alive and well in the Balkans in the 1940s. Convert or die was the choice on the 900,000 Orthodox Serbs in the new state of Croatia, run by Nazi puppet Anton Pavelic and Roman Catholic primate Archbishop Aloysius Stepanek. 200,000 of them were converted, and the other 700,000 who preferred to die were tortured, shot, burned, and buried alive. This appalling persecution, carried out mainly by Ustashi priests and friars for the triumph of Christ in Croatia, included many of the worst atrocities of the war. Certainly the mutilations were horrific, the savagery terrible. Few people know what took place in Croatia during the Second World War. News of it had been simply suppressed. And with that, I want to get to another thing. That's exactly what's happening today. The truth about the Jesuits, the Vatican, and what's happening in our country is being suppressed.
It's also what happens when you listen to the radio host, Alex Jones, who claims that 9/11 and the Oklahoma City bombings were inside jobs.
the likes of people in the alternative media, and I can name their names, John Stadtmiller and his radio station, Jeff Brent, the rest of these guys, the Alex Jones and GCN, who control most of the alternative media, and many other people, have not given you the straight story. They've not researched history and will suppress this because they are protecting the Vatican so that this Inquisition can take place unabated in America. It's your life, folks. It's the life of your children. And if you're going to just fall for, their ploys, you know what? You deserve what you get. And the mainstream media has proved to be a whore. So now has the alternative media. With that, I want to get to Eric Phelps. Eric, how are you?
Doing well, Greg. Pleasure to be with you and your listeners.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring that up for the first 10 minutes of the show to show how important it is. Over the years, there have been over 6,000 different books written about the Jesuits over the course of history. And what this French writer said is most of them have been suppressed. And that's why it's important for people like you to come forward and write again and to continue throughout history, to continue writing against them, because they are just making it impossible for people to find truth. Now, I know people in the media are smart as me or you, and they know the truth. They're just suppressing it. And I wanted to get your opinion about how important it is to continue this pursuit of exposing the people who are really hiding the Jesuit and Vatican evils in this, what I call the Fourth Reich.
Yeah, well, it's absolutely important because it's the Jesuits who rule the country. And I have a quote in my book by G. Gordon Liddy, who was trained by Jesuits at Fordham, and his father was very intimately involved with the Jesuits there. And the quote in his book that I quote in mine is, his book is Will, the autobiography of G. Gordon Liddy. He says in there that the Jesuits at Fordham rule the world and they enjoy it. Mm-hmm. And G. Gordon Liddy knows who rules. And so all these guys in Washington know who rules in the Beltway. And yet they're under oath or under death threats not to say anything. And so as a result, the people think, well, in fact, there are two political parties, and there really is a race, and there really is an election, when that couldn't be any farther from the truth. So indeed, we need to continue to reveal the history of the Jesuits so that in the flow or in the stream of history, we're brought to the present, and it makes perfect sense as to how they got this power and how they rule.
Yeah, and that takes us to how they control the media. Just for a point, last time you were on the show, we discussed this in depth, but I think it's worth mentioning just for a couple minutes again. And when you start looking at some of the past books that have been written about the Jesuits, and your book, which cites numerous people throughout the course of history warning us about the Vatican and their evils, even up to the Croatian genocide in World War II, and just as late as the genocide in Rwanda in the 90s. And what's so upsetting is that none of these people who profess to be in the alternative media, who we talked about, will deal with these issues in a fact-by-fact basis. And I think the reason is, if they did, their cover would be finally up. What's your thoughts?
I agree completely, and they would not have a show anymore. I think the only one in the alternative media that ever really did deal with the Jesuits was sincerely and persistently was William Cooper. Mm-hmm. And so after they finished killing him, they felt that the main voice of exposing the Jesuits was gone, but little did they know the Lord had other things in mind, that there would be a host of other people now that would rise up and expose them for what they are. But indeed, the Jesuit order, what I want to concentrate on when I have my newsletter going and maybe even a broadcast with American Voice and thinking about it for an hour a week, is to continually set forth the great authors of the past and what they wrote on the Jesuit order, with the great statesmen of Europe, what they had to say about them, the leaders in World War II, what they had to say about them, and so that the reader may become very, very familiar with Jesuit history, and so that he's not surprised to see that all these Jesuit grads are manning key positions in the media. So when you see the Jesuit connection there, then people can know that they have an agenda.
Yeah, and it not only stops with the media, it's also in our government and in the banking sector. And basically, if you look at some of their followers, it's amazing how much power they have. And it appears that they hide behind this one simple method, and that is to say, we are the sons of God, we are just a religious organization, and how dare you criticize us?
That's right. And you see, the reason why we can attack them is because we're taking their own writings that they don't want you to know,